So, welcome. I'm very excited and honored to have Aunt Jeannine Powers here, and Uncle Francis to talk about the Bisson family and the heritage that comes down from Canada and came to Brunswick. And the goal here is to tell some or as much of the story about that and the Bissons in the area as we can in the time that we have. So maybe we'll start with a question and feel free to jump in. And I guess my first question was, when did the first Bisson come down to Maine?
To Maine?
Yeah, to Maine. And who was it?
Well, that probably would have been Uncle Arthur.
Yeah.
Or
Uncle Arthur on the farm. And then after that, no, there was not one more uncle. It was because when Daddy came to the country, he worked at the bakery, and it was his cousin. But Uncle Napoleon did come shortly after that because he worked at that store. No, it was Daddy that came after that. And I have all these notes. It's too bad that I can't see them right now. But who Daddy lived with Uncle Arthur and Aunt Odile when he first came, and working at the bakery. That's how he met Mama, and because she came over to buy bread, and then he also delivered bread at their house. Then, see, after that, who would have come?
Uncle Achille.
Uncle Achille came.
Uncle Fida.
Uncle Fida. Yeah, that would have been it.
So there were how many? 4 brothers that came?
There were 9 brothers in the family. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, 9 brothers and 3 sisters.
Mm.
I thought the interesting thing about that was of the 3 sisters, 2 sisters married 2 brothers.
Huh.
That got a little confusing because 2 Martin sisters.
Now,
2 Martin
Pauline's
sisters
grandfather.
Yeah.
Pauline's grandfather was another one. He was,
Yeah.
what was his name?
Uncle Adelaide.
Adelaide.
Yeah.
So this is Pauline Nadeau.
Pauline
Yeah.
Nadeau's
Yeah.
grandfather.
Grandfather.
Yeah.
And he was one of them that came down.
He
Yes.
was one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Uncle Arthur came down and he started the farm,
The farm. Yeah.
which is today the Bisson Meat Market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many cows he has, but I think there's about 600
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, Rick, that the real estate back then
Mhm.
must have been a lot cheaper because there's over 600 acres in that farm.
Is that right? Yeah.
So, I mean, he bought up a huge tract of land
Mhm.
when he came, which probably was worth nothing then.
Right. Right. Expensive probably then.
Yeah.
To some extent.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Daddy loved the farm too. He enjoyed going up there, but I don't think he would have been the kind that could have cleaned out pens from. So, no, he did enjoy the farm. We went every weekend, every Saturday, we went up to the farm to visit.
Mm. Were there any chores to be done when you were there, or was it just a visit?
No, but the little piglets were really interesting because, they were all over the place. But that was a long time afterwards.
Mm.
Yeah.
So where was Uncle Arthur in the birth order?
He's the oldest.
He was the oldest of the.
Yeah.
Was he the oldest of? So it was 12 altogether. 9 boys, 3 girls.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the oldest. And Lucille was the oldest girl. And she died in childbirth. And she was Jean Paul's mother. And Uncle Arthur well, I've lost track now. Who was the oldest uncle we had on the farm?
Uncle Arthur.
Oh, it is Uncle Arthur. Okay. Well, I'm 91 years old, and I'm bound to get mixed up once in a while. Anyway, Uncle Arthur and Aunt Lucille brought up the granddaughter grandson that was born up when she died in childbirth. So it was a nice family, just the same.
Yeah. So Uncle Arthur came down and started the meat market. What? And then Grampy went to work for the bakery.
Yeah. The meat market came a lot later. It was Beechwood Farm Dairy was the original point of the farm, I guess, was the dairy part. And he had a regular dairy route, just like Oakhurst Dairy or whatever, delivered to houses, But later on, they get into the butchering business. They moved a slaughterhouse from across the Canance River. They dragged it up there, and he started into the meat business, and then he get into the retail part of it. But the original start was slaughtering his own animals.
And then they had the milk.
They had
milk delivery.
That was that was the first part of the farm was a milk business.
Yeah.
But
what do you think? What was the reason that Uncle Arthur came down from Canada?
To make a living.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually why Daddy came too. Yeah.
Not many jobs in Canada at that time, or
no,
probably not. I mean, they all migrated to here, and my father came because of the Healey's. My grandmother was a Healey. I mean, my grandmother was a Healey.
Yeah,
and so the Healey relatives had the bakery in Maine, and that's when he came down. Because of the Healey family.
So how do the Healeys play into this? So
the cousins.
Cousins.
Yeah.
Well, cousins, but originally our grandmother was a Healey.
Yeah, but
your grandmother. Okay.
Yeah.
Uncle Arthur married his cousin, and she was a Healey. Aunt Ozil was a Healey.
She was?
Yeah, she was his cousin.
Okay, so
I don't know how that worked, but it did. Yeah.
Well, they lived. They live fairly close. They live in Pond du Lac.
They had 12 children.
Yeah, so let's go back there now. So Grampy and his siblings, parents, lived in Pond du Lac.
Originally,
in
Saint
Canada?
Nicolette.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Pointe du Lac.
And Pond du Lac is a little...
It's right on the water.
Town on the water.
Right on the St. Lawrence
River.
Right on the St. Lawrence, yeah. Outside of Trois-Rivières.
Yeah. They had started in Saint Nicolette, and then the second house was a brownstone house that was just outside of town, and then they ended up moving in town in Pond du Lac. But Grampy Bisson was a horse trader, partial farmer kind of a guy.
Your grandfather.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really strange, too, because he was a very small man, not big at all, not like the Bissons are. But he was very active. They always tell a story about when they went up to visit at one point, and I think my father, he had something wrong with his ankle or something, and he was on a crutch, but he was on the top of the rabbit house, tarring the roof with this. He was very active, but he was small, very small. And he didn't speak any English, not at all.
Not a word.
Did your grandmother speak any English?
I don't really know my grandmother because she died in childbirth when Lucille, the last girl, was born. Marcel, when Marcel was born. Yeah. And then Daddy married this other woman.
You mean Grampy married another woman?
I'm sorry.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he married this other woman. And no, they never had any children. But anyway, no. But Daddy was happy when he came to this country. I remember him saying that one of the things that he couldn't get used to, that riding out through Cathance in that area, that they had apples on the trees. They hadn't harvested them. He says, in Canada, you wouldn't have done that. You would have taken every apple there was and done something with it. But I guess he thought that the Americans lived pretty well. They could afford to leave the apples on the tree.
Rick, you've seen the picture of my father driving the tender crust bread truck. Okay, well, that's where he gets started driving truck.
Was that a truck or was it a horse and buggy? I always
No, it was a
that.
truck.
It was a truck.
Yeah. And he delivered bread to Bath, and that's how he get kind of mixed up in Bath, and then he get into the trucking business himself. Well, he started with a horse and buggy. But
and a horse named Dan.
Yes. And a horse named Dan.
And $30. I remember them talking about that.
Yeah. And what did he So at that point in time, how old do you think he was when he started? So how old was he when he came down?
He must have been around 20.
20.
21.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he went into the service.
Went in the Army.
Went into the service probably to get his citizenship.
He did.
He did, yeah.
And Mama lost hers because of that.
Hmm.
When they get married, the rule back then was if you married a foreigner, you lost your citizenship.
Oh.
Well, he was a foreigner when they get married, but then he get his citizenship through being in the Army. And then she was a long time getting her citizenship back.
Yeah, they were trying to come across the border from Canada after they'd been there for a visit, and they had a hard time. They were kept back a little bit, and come to find out it was because she wasn't considered a citizen. So she had to go through that. In fact, I've got that paper upstairs.
I think it was in the early 50s before she finally got her.
Yeah, it was after they were married and had children.
Yeah. A long while.
So he was 20-ish, early 20s when he came down, and that would have been what year, roughly?
Well, they were married in 1919, and at that time he was 24.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was right around 1918 or so, something like that.
Yeah. He never went overseas because the war ended before he ever got assigned over there.
He was just stationed at Camp Devens, which is where my husband was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, no, and after that, I have their love letters if anybody would like them. Mama's are in English and Daddy's were in French because I could read French, but they're upstairs. I'm going to pass them out.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
Because she had to be in Canada until she got her citizenship back. Is that right?
No. She was here.
Oh, these were love letters while he was.
Oh yeah, no, when he was in the Army.
Okay. Yeah.
But he really was kind of an amazing guy when you think about it. Came from Canada, didn't have any English, learned English while he was in the service, and his English was pretty good.
It sure was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He had a little bit of an accent, but he did pretty well with English.
Yeah. He couldn't say Philadelphia.
No.
No. And that's where they started to call him Joe, which was what you tag on to a Frenchman who doesn't speak any English, and just stayed with him.
So he actually got the name Joe in the military?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've had that story wrong all these years.
Where'd you think you get it from?
Oh, I made up a story, or somebody made up a story at one time that he delivered for Joe's Bakery.
No.
And that's how we got the name. Oh, geez.
No,
I got to backtrack on that one.
There again, I may be wrong too, but he lived with me for 10 years, so I got a lot of stories from him. Yeah.
So he got his name.
Yeah.
So his name was Lucian Bisson.
Lucian Bisson.
No middle name.
No middle name.
Yeah. And my Lucian is not around the corner, that picture. It's not Lucian Jr., because his was Lucian Conrad.
This was a son who died.
Yeah.
He was 11.
11.
This is Grampy and your brother.
Yeah.
Lucian.
Yeah, it's my godfather. And Jackie was my godmother. And, no, Lucian was Lucian Conrad Bisson. Yeah. And I also have all his belongings and things, too, that I found in the attic when I was cleaning out the house to sell it. Someday someone might want to look at all that. They say he was a very dear little boy. He was an altar boy. Well,
we were talking about it the other day, and he was 11 years old, and when he died, and my mother was pregnant with your
Richard.
father at the time, and I got thinking about it, and I said, if he had died, your father and I would have been working for Lucian.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of being the guys that ran the company.
Yeah.
We would have been the guys that helped the guy that really ran the company.
So Lucian was 11, and what was the age difference between you all?
Well, he died before your father was born.
Oh, before my father was born, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was 2 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he died of?
Well, it was
I don't know. It was a blood disease. It might have been leukemia. It might have been Hodgkin's disease. We're not
100% sure.
We don't really know.
Yeah. That was one of 4 that Mama lost.
Yeah.
So then we go back to 1919. September 29th, 1919 is when he married Mama.
September 19th.
29th.
So
September
September-
29th, 1919.
Okay.
He married Mama. And they lost their first child.
How did they meet?
The bakery.
The bakery. So
yeah.
This
Mama
is the
had her
bakery.
eyes on him.
This is the bakery that he worked at,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and he's delivering bread for them.
Do you know where it was, the bakery?
Remind me. I think I
It
do,
was,
but
it
On
was,
Mill
see,
Street.
it was on Mill Street.
Yeah.
Mill Street went right where the highway is now in Brunswick, and it was on the other side, the side that they tore down. And we used to go there every Sunday.
Sunday morning after church.
Yeah, and they had just one of those kind of things. They had bread, that was going through the slicer, and if something happened and it didn't make it through the slicer, we'd go in there and we'd pick it up off the floor, and we'd on the way home
Eat
because
the
we rode the back of the
insides.
truck, and we'd take that bread, we'd eat the inside of it out and just leave the crust.
So good.
So we had this big, long, hollow tube, with just the crust on the outside.
Yeah.
We didn't ride in a car till 1947. My father got the first car, so I was 10. She was 15 before we ever had a car.
Wow. So you would ride in the back of a truck.
Yeah.
Always rode in the back of a truck.
How many of you in there? 5 of you? Or-
Well, it depended on the season, too. If it was cold, then...
She probably rode in the front.
Well, I had Richard in between the gears, and Mama held Francis. So we had
So there'd be 4 of you in the front.
5.
5.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah. No, we never had it. That's why the kids, they all have the cars that are hard for me to get in and out of. And Jean Marie says, "You do a good job with that, Aunt Jeannine." I said, "Well, I only had a truck to ride in until I was a junior in high school."
So he's working at the bakery,
Yeah.
and
Mama was working at the mill.
her name was Yvette
Mm-hmm.
Messier
Yeah.
was her last name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that side of the family came from Roxton Falls. And I guess it was Grammy Messier. If you ever saw the spinning wheel
Yes.
that we used to have.
Yes. I used to play with that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, every kid did. I did too.
Yeah.
And we've got this picture of her. This would have been Ma's grandmother.
He was Mama's family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever go up to the sugar house?
I never made it to the sugar house.
You never did.
I think David and I, your son David,
Yeah.
and I were the youngest of the grandchildren, and we missed it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Well, I can see that, but he took us, took us all up there, including
All the grandchildren.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was quite a trip. I remember everybody.
Yeah.
We were waiting.
Yeah.
But time controls everything.
Well, it does. That was a fun place to go to.
Well, because he may have been getting older too.
Well, that's what it was. Yeah, he was getting older.
Yeah.
And for him at that age, I don't know how old he was then, but to take 2 young kids
That's right.
up to Canada, that would be a lot of work.
Yeah.
He loved kids, though.
He did.
Yeah. He was a great guy.
Yeah, I used to love to sit on his lap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and hear him. Just the way he did have great English, but he had a great little accent.
Yeah.
Sure did.
The way his R's rolled.
Yeah.
Oh, we've joked about him because his disciplinary was not always the greatest, but we've decided that I got chased up the stairs once in a while for being naughty, and he never caught me, but he never planned to catch me. And Francis was talking about the time that he walked out to Harding's all by himself, and my father picked him up and put him in the back of the truck. And I said, I think that was because he didn't want to have to get have to scold Francis. I don't think he really knew how to scold people. I mean, after
I don't know. He was
awfully.
He was
good
pretty
about-
mild mannered.
Hmm.
Pretty mild mannered.
Yeah, he really was.
I was following your father, when this whole episode took place. He and Frank Talbot were trying to ditch me, and I was tagging along because I'm, younger, and they didn't want me along. And they had a wagon, like a little red wagon,
Mhm.
and so it was leaving a track in the road. And so I started to follow him. And it turned on Western Avenue. And because Western Avenue turned into the highway back then. So I'm following this track. And it was getting late. It was getting towards dark. And I was only 5. Now imagine a 5-year-old kid walking from my house to Hardy's plant.
I can't.
I mean, I didn't get picked up by anybody. I didn't,
Just from perspective, that's probably how many miles?
Oh, it's probably 3 or 4.
3 or 4 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kept following these tracks. I don't know how my father found me, but he came along, and we had this little, the smallest truck we had was that 8-foot box truck. And he came along and turned around, picked me up, put me in the back of the truck. Now, home we went, and he never said a word to me. I mean, at least I do not remember him ever giving me the devil for anything.
I don't either.
Huh.
Or Mama either.
Yeah.
Mama was very easygoing too. Yeah.
But I'm going to say about this Roxton Falls thing. We used to go up there at sugar time, and it was great for a kid because Aunt Florida, who was Uncle Harry's wife, she started off, they had a buckwheat field. They had like 30, 40 acres of buckwheat. And so you'd have buckwheat pancakes in the morning, cooked right on top of a cast iron stove, no pan or anything, with maple syrup on it. Then they'd fry eggs in maple syrup, and you'd have a dessert of something with shaved maple syrup on it. And then you'd go up to the sugar house, and because they're boiling sap, 24 hours a day up there. And so they've got a little stove going there, and they take the syrup and they put it in a pot and they cook it on the stove till it became more like a candy. And then they take and they have a wood barrel out there, you pack snow on top of the wood barrel and pour the candy on the snow. You probably had that before.
Oh, yeah.
And, it was, for a kid, it was fabulous.
Yeah.
And then you'd eat so much of that stuff, you kind of have to get overloaded with it. So you eat a few olives and you're ready to go again. Meanwhile, you want something to drink, you go up to the tree and drink the sap.
So this is the messier side.
It's the messier
That
side.
had that. I always wondered how that came about.
Yeah.
But I remember the cans of maple syrup.
Yeah. Sirud Drab.
Yes.
Towards the end, Daddy brought it home, and it was special cans, and he would bring a whole case home to give away. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty special.
It sure was. And like you talked about the shaving off, it was a block
Yeah.
of, I don't know how it got to be that, but
Just cooked it.
They cook it some more.
cooked it some more.
Yeah, it'll turn to sugar eventually.
Yeah.
That on hot toast with butter
Yep. Yeah.
didn't get much better than that.
No, and beside that, we had the milk with the cream on the top from the farm, and they'd take that. It would push the cap up, when it froze, and it would be this much cream on it, and we'd put that on the toast or the maple syrup, and that was it. We were lucky.
Mm.
And when the war came, we didn't seem to notice things that we were missing because we had the farm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And of course, I love blood sausage.
And there was plenty of that at the farm.
Well, they only have it twice a year when they slaughter the animals. But I do like blood sausage, and Daddy liked that too, and so did Mama. But he doesn't like it.
So
the last time we went to Canada, there wasn't any place you could go because the place in Nicollet burned down. The place that was the sandstone in the middle, when they were built, I think it's Route 20 across Canada, that got taken by eminent domain. And then the house that was in town, which was the last place Grampy lived, blew up. Had a gas leak, and it blew up the bakery, and it took the house down at the same time. So there's nothing up there that you can go see. But the interesting thing would be to go to the church in Pointe du Lac and look at the headstones. The Martins, the Bissons, the Healys, they're all there.
That was,
As a matter of fact, I've got slides of that too, you know.
I remember going to the church.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the tombstones.
Yeah.
Yeah. We went there. Yep. We went there. It was Jean Louis had a ceremony of some an anniversary maybe, and there was a special mass.
Yeah.
how come we weren't there?
Well, we might have been. I don't know.
I think you were. Yeah.
I remember one of the last times that we went, and because I do understand French, and as we were walking down the aisle, I heard a couple of the cousins saying about Francis, "Oh, look at he looks just like Uncle Lucian." He did too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. We had good times with that, you know, and because Lucille's not doing well. And Jean Louis, they're all my age. Jacqueline is a year younger than I am. I'm the oldest of the
Cousins?
Yeah.
Cousins, right?
The ones that were all my age.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because we mentioned that Jean Louis.
Jean Louis is younger than I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Catholic bishop?
He was the Bishop of Peru.
Bishop of Peru, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then Jacqueline was she a Bisson or a Messier?
She's a Bisson.
Okay.
And she was the White Sisters of Africa. That was the organization she was in. She's not doing well, but she's 90 years old.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And now, Jeannine, I thought she was a Martin.
She is a Martin.
You said she was a Bisson. She's a Martin.
Okay. So this
Jean Louis was a Martin.
Okay.
Yes.
Jean Louis was a
As
Martin.
I say,
Yeah.
Okay.
have to forget it because I am getting old.
Well, and so Jean Louis was a Martin, and the Martin connection was, remind me again.
Martin was that two Martin men married two Bisson women.
Okay. Yeah.
That I know.
Yeah.
And it was quite interesting anyway. No, when Jean-Louis' mother died, it was in childbirth, and it was Aunt Marcel. And she went to live with the cousins. And what were their names? Were they I've forgotten what cousin it was that I remember going to their house to visit them. But anyway, so she was brought up by them, and she used their last name. But she was a Martin. No, she was a Bisson.
Well, you know, it's
so
kind of
confusing.
hard to remember back
Oh, yeah.
all the people because there were a lot of them. You know, they all had big families, and so it's a little tough.
So Grampy had 12. How many did Grammy have?
12.
She had 12 as well.
Yeah.
That's 24. You got to remember.
That's a
And
lot
then
of
it's
children.
cousins.
Yes,
Yeah.
and every one of them married except one. And the same way with the other family. Aunt Marcel never married and never had children. So that produced a lot of cousins.
Was Grammy born here in the States?
Oh, yes.
She
Yes.
was.
Yeah.
Okay.
She was born on the Mare Point Road in the little house there on the corner on Rossmore Road.
Oh.
That was my grandfather's place. And he had a little schoolhouse across the road where the children went to school. And when they took the house in town on 25 Cumberland Street and sold the house on Mare Point, they had to close the school because there weren't enough children left in the school.
Really?
And my Aunt Grace was one of the tenders, if you want to call it that. And she was supposed to go over to the school every morning and make sure that the water was not frozen and that there was heat in the school and all. Well, she never ever really got to do that job, but she got $6 a year, and it was written up in the town records that Grace had gotten $6 for doing that job. But I guess her brothers filled in for her most of the time. And and they had to close the school after the kids moved to Brunswick. There were not enough children on the Mare Point Road. So,
they supposedly I'd heard this story was that my grandfather had a horse that they put the kids on to go to school
2 at a time,
and they'd go to school and then let the horse go, and the horse would walk home on his own. And
put a couple.
he shuttled the kids back and forth
No
to
kidding.
the school.
Yeah.
Wow.
We never figured out where the school was.
It was on Grampy's property.
Where it was?
Across the road was from the house.
We're in Canada now, right?
No. We're
Oh,
in
no.
Brunswick, Maine.
Oh, this.
Right.
Wait a minute now. Okay, so
Yeah.
who's doing this?
So
Grampy Messier.
Grampy Messier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And they were, I don't know how many of them were there, but they finally moved to 25 Cumberland Street in Brunswick. Grampy was working as custodian, would you say, to the mill?
yeah.
It was something to do with the mills anyway. And they were
Yeah.
living in the apartment houses there. And then Grampy bought the house on Cumberland Street. And they moved there. So,
The mill was kind of the Bath Iron Works in Brunswick. A lot of people ended up working in there. I don't know how many, I think my mother did, and maybe some of the other girls, I don't know. But a lot of people in Brunswick worked at that mill.
Probably brought a lot of people to Brunswick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you did.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, it was
So they married.
September
Lucian
29th,
and
1919.
Yeah. And where did they live?
St. John's
At St. John's?
Church, in the basement at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, the church
Had
was
a
not
fire.
done then. It was just the basement.
Well, they'd had a fire.
Yeah.
And they were married at 6 o'clock in the morning because they wanted to get an early start to drive to Canada. And Grammy went with them. Whenever there was a car going to Canada, it didn't matter if it was a wedding car or what, she went with them. So, and because they went to Roxton Falls, and then they went to
Can you imagine driving to Canada in probably a 1915 car?
Yeah.
I mean, it had to be a Model T or something,
Yeah, something old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a short drive, and probably not a very comfortable drive.
No.
And it was September, so it wasn't too
September.
cold, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost 1st of November. So, no, anyway, that's what they did. And it was always kind of a joke to us, but apparently it happened quite often. If there was a car going to Canada, she went with them. You know that Grampy and Grammy were married in Canada.
So
That's what we've never been able to figure out why. My grandfather came from Canada, okay?
this is your grandfather,
Uncle
Messier?
Messier.
Okay.
came from Canada, and he met my grandmother. But when they were married, they went back to Canada to be married. And the only thing I can think of, we've always discussed this, that maybe it was because all his family was in Canada. All Grampy's family was, and so they probably thought it was easier for them to go to Canada to be married.
And for everybody to come down here.
Yeah. So anyway, that was that. But
Well, it's kind of funny, Rick, because Emily
Your granddaughter, Emily.
lives in Upton, which is just a few miles from Roxton Falls.
Really?
She speaks fluent English and goes French,
Yeah.
and the kids do too.
Her kids do?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. We were planning on going up to her place in this fall, but I don't know if we will or not. But I'd like to go back up there. I think we were the last. Were you with us when we went the last time to?
No,
Roxton
I was
Falls?
with you one time, but it wasn't the last time, I don't think.
We went up, and
That's when the cousins lived across the road. The house was closed up and everything.
no, Arthur was still there. This is just before he died.
Uh-huh.
And they took us up to the sugar house, which obviously has been shut down for years. He tapped around 5,000 trees.
Wow.
And he had a big maple operation.
And they probably were single or it wasn't tubed together. It was all buckets, probably.
It was buckets back then. Yeah.
Hmm.
And so we went up, and I drove by the place 2 or 3 times, and I thought I could remember how to get there. Well, I got to Roxford Falls, and I took the right road out of town. I knew which one it was. And I drove up and down this road several times, and I couldn't find the house. And I said, I know it's here someplace. Well, come to find out, I hadn't been there for 40 years.
I was with you.
You were with me.
Yeah.
And so when we finally found the house, the barn was still there, but the silos had been torn down. The front of the house had been changed and had put pillars. Up and a stone face on the front of the house. And I just didn't recognize it.
Yeah.
But once we found it, Arthur was there. And was her name Jeannine?
Yeah.
His daughter.
Cousin's name is Jeannine.
Yeah. So, we finally found them, and they gave us a tour of the place. But there were old stuff on the wall that they had used when they made sugar. And
it's too bad you didn't bring some of it home.
Oh, Jeannine, Pat would have loved to have some of those tools and stuff that hung on the wall.
Yeah.
That place was set up really great because on the back of the building was a big ledge, and had you could drive up over the ledge. So they had this like a 500-gallon tank that they collected the sap in. That when the going was good, they did it with a tractor. But when they had a lot of snow, they used the horses. They drained this tank, gravity fed, into another tank inside the building. And then from there, it gravity fed into the cooker, and it had a thing like a toilet float. And as the sap went down, it drained off some more sap into the cooker, which was probably the thing that's probably 30 feet long, and had baffles in it. And they kept, the sap would move along in this tank until we get to the far end, and they had a thermometer there, and they could check it to see when it was the right temperature. But they boiled it so hard that they had a piece of salt pork on a stick, and if it started to look like it was going to boil over, they just put this piece of salt pork in there, and it
take the temperature down.
It would kill the
foam. The foam down.
Oh, the foam.
Yeah. But it was foaming up, when it got too hot.
And probably the salt pork would taste pretty good after it came out of there.
Yeah, it did.
They had, because they had a lot of wood, because it took a lot of wood to, run this thing. But if it wasn't burning hot enough, they had this thing that came from a shoe factory, and it was when they stamp out shoe bottoms, because that sheet, that is the waste. They would throw that on. The black smoke would come out of that chimney, and it would drive the hell out of that fire.
See, he got to do all those things, but with me being a girl, I ended up having to do other things. I got a trip into Montreal with Arthur, and I thought he was going to kill us before we got back. He drove like a madman. Awful. And I was with Pauline from Canada, not from Canada, from where Jackie used to live. It wasn't Pauline Nato, our relative.
Yeah.
It was relative on the other side. And she had come to visit me, and my father took us both up there, but oh my God. And he asked Arthur to entertain us. Well, boy, he did.
Your father probably has told you the story about he and Arthur going into town they had to repair the tank, and they had it on a trailer, and they were driving in town with a tractor, and Richard was driving the tractor, and yeah, Arthur says to your father, because he just barely spoke English, high speed, smooth road. Slow speed, rough roads.
That's your gearing.
Yeah, yeah. He let me drive the tractor up to the sugar house one time. The sugar house was back, probably a half a mile in the woods. And he let me drive the tractor up, and it was icy.
See, I didn't get to do all that.
Big old farmall tractor. Had 2 wheels right close in the front. It was like a tricycle. So I'm going up this track, and it looked to me like I was going off to the side, so I'm staring, and I'm staring a little bit more. Those things, when you turn the wheel, those wheels will go right around 360. I'm going up this track, and the front wheel is stuck in this rut crossways, and it's going up over the hill crossways.
Oh my God!
So was High Street your first house that you lived in, or did they move into High Street? I guess was that their first house?
They lived on Shepherd Street
in Bath.
Do you know, Francis? I think that was just a rental house. So.
Oh, I probably yeah.
Daddy bought the house on High Street when I was born, and I paid $2,600 for that house. Because they lived. That's where they lived when Lucian died, and Phyllis was there. Jackie
on High Street, you mean? Yeah.
I think Phyllis was born on Shepherd Street. Anyway, no, I think I was probably the first baby on High Street. Mama had, of all the children, she always had the babies in the dining room. She had a nurse come in, and anyway. But the doctor wouldn't take the last one, that was me, because he claimed that she had so many problems and she'd lost several. And he didn't want to take the chance on losing another one. So I was born in the hospital, and she had no problems with me, except that I was a very puny-looking baby. But no, the rest of them were all born in the dining room. The very first time I ever saw Francis, he was 5 years old. I was 5 years old, and Francis was in the antique crib that I have upstairs that everybody slept in. And I see myself on the rung looking over that at him. And then she took the baby into the kitchen and to give him a bath. And, her name was Nurse Henry. That was who took care of my mother whenever she had babies at home. So, anyway.
So they're married and living on High Street.
Yeah.
And is at that point, when did Grampy start the moving business?
1919.
When he was on
1919.
the other street.
Yeah.
Shepherd Street. Don't you think when he first came?
Yeah, it was 1919.
Yeah.
Bought a horse and a buggy.
Buggy?
Yeah.
A jig, is that what it was called?
A jig, yeah.
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 You've seen the picture in Bath. It's on the wall.
Yes.
When you go up through the arcade. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my father.
And he would deliver, what was his main source of business then?
I don't know how he got started, but he was the dray agent for the Maine Central Railroad for years. But I don't know what he started doing. I mean,
when Mr. Brown sold the business to Daddy, what was he serving then?
It was a furniture mover. Furniture mover.
It was, okay. Yeah, but Daddy did some tricky things because he moved pianos out of the third floor of some places, and God. Yeah.
Yep, that piano gear is gone now.
Yeah.
But that
was an antique.
Yeah.
Atlantic Motor Express, that was the first, that's the
first hookup they had with a freight company.
Yeah, and then we went to Honeywell.
Yeah.
And then
the
last one.
Well, the last one was we bought out Lincoln's Motor Express.
Oh. Anyway, we all worked there. I didn't last very long because I had one baby after another, and I think Daddy finally figured out it was time to hire, your grandmother.
Yeah. Nana
Right?
Bertrand. Yeah. Nana Bertrand.
Betsy's mother.
Martha Bertrand, yes. Yeah.
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 Anyway,
So when did he buy the truck? It was 1921,
21.
right? Yeah.
It was a leftover. It was a 1919 truck, but they hadn't sold it. And so it was 2 years old already when he bought it.
And did he buy it from someplace right in Bath? Oh, do you
Your
remember?
father's got the bill of sale
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
somewheres.
Yeah, that's right. It's in the room. Yeah. Huh. And that was a crank start.
Yeah.
It still is. Yeah.
Yeah, it still is. You know, that engine does have a place for a starter.
Yes.
You know, it's
Yes.
got a little port on the flywheel.
Yep.
And I probably hasn't got a ring gear in there,
Right.
but it was kind of designed to have a starter.
Yeah. So legend says that he would be able to start that first or second flip all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, back then it was new, you know.
Yeah.
He hauled a lot of cement for the Counting Bridge on the east side, you know, because you would have had to go across on the ferry, and so we used to transport back and forth with that cement. Now that truck isn't very big when you look at today's truck. And I tell you the truth, I don't think he ever drove a tractor trailer. You know, we bought tractors from Atlantic Motor, used stuff, but I don't think he ever drove a tractor trailer. I don't ever remember him doing it.
well, he cut his fingers off,
Yeah, that was.
and he really didn't do much after that.
Yeah, but I don't think he ever drove a tractor trailer because
Even when he had both.
even when he had both hands.
Oh, okay.
Because he wasn't driving so much then. He had other people driving, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I don't remember much about that because those things all happened when I was about 10 years old.
Yeah.
So tell us a story about him losing his fingers.
His fingers, oh dear. Well,
How old was he?
I was 4 or 5.
yeah, and I was 10, I think. Well, I had come home from boarding school. I was 10. Yeah. You do the math.
Yeah, that's. We can do the math.
Well, I know, but I say I was a bookkeeper, and I worked in a lot of jobs and had a lot of money to handle, but I can't do any math in my head anymore. I'm too old.
He was in his 30s.
Hmm?
He was in his 30s, probably. I'm guessing.
Well, I think he
He
was
got
older.
married when he
no,
was-
I think he
he was
was older than
older,
that because it was in
Yeah, I think
World War II.
Oh, it was during World War II?
Yeah, because I came home from Stella Maris when in 1942,
Okay.
and he was, so it was 42, 43, around there. No, he had Tony Pouliot was his helper, and my father did anything to earn money. Had a big family, and he was out, had the load of wood, and he
This was at the house, right, on High
house
Street?
and backyard.
Down the basement, or was it backyard?
Backyard, and couldn't get it started. And anyway, somehow or other, my father put his hand on the blade to guide himself as he was going to lean down to look at something. And when he did, Tony pulled the right thing, and off the fingers came.
Because this was a big round buzzsaw blade.
One of the great big round ones, yeah.
Big teeth.
A tilt-top table.
So anyway-
you put the wood on the table,
Mhm.
and you
Tip
tilted
it
it
in.
into the saw.
And then Tony
there's no
picked up
guide-
the fingers and
no
put
guide on the blade.
him in a handkerchief. And my father drove up to the hospital.
To the Bath Hospital.
Bath Hospital with Tony and the fingers.
Mm.
Anyway, Dr. Winchenbach did the surgery, and he did a wonderful job, though, because this one finger was a little bit long, and Dr. Winchenbach thought it would make kind of an awkward-looking hand. So he cut them all the same length, and off went the wedding ring. And that was that. And Daddy had a fine time in the hospital, didn't he? He invited everybody down here for lobsters afterwards. And
Yeah, he had this knuckle.
Mhm.
but he didn't have these.
Yeah.
But he with a thumb and that knuckle, he could do a heck of a lot.
Was it his right or his left hand?
Left hand.
Left hand. Okay.
Yeah.
And was he right-handed?
Yeah.
Okay. I had that wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could. My little example is he always had a coin, little rubber kind of coin in his pocket, and I when I was out to the shop, he would get that out and he'd give me a quarter or a nickel or whatever it was to go get a candy bar. But I was amazed at how we could do that with one hand.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, you got very good at it. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Had
Yeah.
to-
He could button a button.
Yeah.
He was pretty adept with his hands.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Anyway,
So what was it like growing up with immigrant parents?
immigrant parents.
I mean, they were, well, I guess Grampy was an immigrant.
yeah.
Yeah.
See,
Well,
I went
so
away
was
to
Ma
school.
until she got a citizenship back.
Right.
And considering that Mama only had 6th grade education, she was darn good too with her English and all that sort of thing.
She had beautiful penmanship.
Yeah,
Mhm.
beautiful. Yeah, she really was. Now that I think about it. No, I went to boarding school when I was 8, which is a long story because nobody knows why.
Hmm.
And it was at Stella Maris in Bedford Pool, and because they wanted me to learn to speak French, and I spoke French all right. And I stayed there until I was 10, and that was the end of the 5th grade. And Mom and Daddy came up to visit me, and I burst out crying because my friend Betty Ann had gone home, and I missed her. And I said, I want to go home. And I cried, and they packed me up and took me home.
Nice.
That was that. And I said to Phyllis one day, you can delete this. I said to Phyllis, Phyllis, you were you're 7 years older than I am, and so you must 15. You must have known. Mama must have been sewing on little tabs on my clothes and all that sort of thing. There must have been some discussion about me going away to school. She said, no. She said, you were just a brat. That's why they sent me away. Anyway, I have no complaints. I loved being there, and it was fine. And I loved the sisters, and it was great.
See, I was a brat, but I got away with it.
Well, the boy and the girl, I don't know how to say this. You were encouraged to speak French,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The boys were not encouraged to speak French?
Oh, he wasn't smart enough to speak French.
No.
I got a different story.
No.
I thought it was because they didn't want you to learn French.
Oh, no.
No, but
no.
we were brought up in Bath.
Yes.
And, all the relatives and brothers all spoke French. But, I went to school in Bath, and everybody spoke English. And it was just...
But Francis, it kind of bothered me, though, when they came from Canada, when grandfather came from Canada, and we were the only ones that couldn't speak to him. And Pauline, Nato, and all of them, they could carry on conversations. In fact, when I talked with her this week, she said that one of the reasons that she still likes to call Canada and speak to her cousins there because she doesn't want to forget the French either.
Yeah.
She doesn't speak French anymore around here. And but no, I have no regrets as far as but I thought that the Mother Superior was a cousin of Daddy's too. I was always told that, but I don't know. I'm a little mixed up about what went on in those days.
This is at the boarding school that you went to.
That was in Bedford Pool.
Bedford Pool, yeah.
I had no problems being there. It was fine.
Well, it's funny because you think about speaking French and speaking English. When you think or dream or anything, you do it in English. And I'm sure that my father, he converted everything to French in his mind. I a few times when we'd be over there talking and he's telling me something, he'd go right off into French.
Yeah,
Really?
he did
And,
that.
I kind of had to stop him, Pa. I didn't get that. Oh, and then he'd go off and say it in English. But I'm sure his mind was always thinking in French.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's...
At the end, so we did a little bit of driving back and forth to these places because, you know, he was getting a little old. And I was coming home with Holly and Mary Kate. We'd gone by plane, and then we had a cousin pick us up, and then I drove us all home afterwards. And Daddy would do the same with me. We'd talk about something, then he'd start off in French. Well, it was okay because he'd say, whoops, and I'd say, well, that's all right, I understand. But it didn't take me long to forget some of it, too. But anyway, I can still say the Hail Mary in French. No,
Yeah.
I have no regrets. It was a really, I was happy. Just at the last thing, I just got a little homesick. But see, I didn't see my mother in those days. My mother was stuck with 2 children, Francis and Richard, and I was there. So she'd send Daddy to visit me. And, but the only time they came together, the 2 of them, was the one time then I said, I want to go home. And I did go home. But I don't know. But it didn't much matter.
Great.
Well, I want to say that, did you ever go to Pond du Lac?
Yes.
So you remember the old house. And there was a brick building next door to it that was the bakery.
Yeah.
Well, that's the bakery that I remember. I remember going into the bakery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The old bakery, right?
The last time I was there was Benjamin was probably
8.
maybe. He might have been 4.
In the car on the way there.
Do you remember the bakery was brick, or do you remember the new one?
Brick.
Brick, yeah, that was the old one. That's the one that blew up. And I mean, that was a going operation Sunday morning. People would line up because they cooked, 40, 50 pots.
They'd bring their own pots in, that.
Oh.
They brought their own pots and were filled up and baked in their pots.
Baked beans.
Yeah,
but
baked beans.
they'd go through a carload of beans every, quite often.
Wow.
And
Train car.
A train car.
Train car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a cousin of ours. Her name was Jeannine. She was a Bisson. She married a fellow by the name of...
There were 4 Jeannine Bissons over the years.
He was... his name was Gay.
Gay. She married, yeah.
Can't remember his first name. But anyway, they rebuilt the bakery and had a booming business. But I guess they've sold it now. But I think the bakery's still there. But that was...
I remember being very simple inside. And the breads, the beans were amazing.
Can you imagine baking all those pots? Goodness.
Well, they also cooked some of the pots as these probably 5-gallon, maybe more pots. And along with the bread, the oven was going. It's kind of like, let's do something.
Well, why didn't they bake their own beans?
Who?
These people.
Oh, in Canada, I don't know. I guess they liked them.
Just traditional. Well, I know, but it's not that much to bake a pound of beans.
No.
In fact, I did just last week.
But you can do it really well, or you can not do it well. And when they're really good, they're really good.
I've got some really good. But
the beans they baked, though, aren't like the beans that you bake or I bake. They're quite watery. And because they put salt pork in them, if I've ever lied.
Yeah, that's what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mama baked beans too, and she had a new
pressure cooker.
And she was baking the beans, and it flew off, and we had beans all over the ceiling.
It had a pressure cooker had a little rubber safety like this in there.
Yeah.
And because it had a thing that sat on top, and it must have clogged, and so it blew this little rubber thing out. It squirted on the ceiling. The beans were all on the ceiling.
Oh, dear. Oh, well. We probably heard a little French then, too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that was on the electric stove. But, she started off with a cook stove with wood. And your father and I tried to burn the house down, getting that stove going one time.
Yeah. That was why I thought he knows all the mechanical things that happen. But do you know about your father and Francis almost burning the house down?
I think I've heard parts of the story.
Yeah. Well, I always claim your father was the firebug. He was the one that dreamed up rolling the old potbelly stove out of the garage. Probably weighed 200-300 pounds.
Imagine.
We tipped it over. We rolled it out in the yard. We stood it up. We lit a fire in it. My father came home. Here's this potbelly stove in the middle of the backyard.
Ablaze.
Yeah, that wasn't so bad as when you tried to burn the house down.
I didn't do it. It was Richard.
I'll speak to him
He's
about
the one
that.
that lit the Excelsior down cellar.
I know. Can you imagine? Mama, he came upstairs and said,
I was just the assistant fire chief.
and said, "Can I burn that Excelsior downstairs?" She was talking
what's
to some-
Excelsior? What is that? What is he burning?
You don't know what it
Excelsior?
is?
No.
Gee, these people that are young like that.
I know it. They don't know.
Understand.
They don't know what's going
It
on.
was stuff that you.
It's packing
Packing
material. It's made
material.
out of shredded wood. And back before they had styrofoam and
Yeah.
all that, you had to pack stuff in something, and it was cushioning material.
Mm.
And it looked just like somebody had taken wood and shredded it.
Yeah, it was shredded wood.
Oh, I think I
Yeah.
can picture what it is. Yeah.
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 Well, I mean, that was common to us.
Right.
Well, and it was
Yeah.
great for starting fires because
Yeah.
you put a handful
But he
of
had
that
a
in
whole
there.
tub full. And he asked Mama if he could burn it. And she was talking to somebody, and I don't think she heard what he said. And he said, "Yeah, okay." And next thing you know, that fire was hitting the roof of the upstairs.
In the kitchen?
Yes.
Down cellar into the kitchen.
Oh.
Fortunately, it went down fast enough so they didn't catch.
Hmm.
I don't know. Those two boys, they did more doggone stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it was the beginning of a lot of creativity.
It
Yeah.
was. It was. And,
We learned some stuff to do, and we learned some stuff not to do.
Well, I know. And then he tells me about all the times he had a gun and he fired a gun down cellar.
Oh, well, I must have fired 1,000 rounds down there. You know, I had gone to Bailey's Hardware out on North Street.
I don't remember Bailey's Hardware.
It's where Burt's Oil Business is
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
And I was I might have been 12. I bought a rifle. Imagine a 12-year-old kid going in, buying a rifle. And it was a .22, and it shot 22 long rifles, and these little shots, they called them. But they were like, when you go to Carnival and they've got these shooting galleries.
Yes.
That's what they use, these little, they're just a little bit better than a BB.
Bigger than a BB.
Well, I used to buy them 500 at a time. And I went down cellar and I shot so much time down there. All target stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Into the walls.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I had wood behind it, so.
Everything was safe.
Yeah, it was all safe, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we should probably wrap up. And I appreciate you taking the time. I would love to make a copy of that
Yes, please.
if I could.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Do we have to swear to any of these stories?
No, because, I think I probably would have sworn to the story about, what was the one that I got wrong?
Joe.
About him being Joe because of the bakery truck.
Oh, yeah.
I've been saying that for
It
years.
could have been. I just assumed that.
No, I don't think
it
so.
was
Yeah.
In the Army,
It would make sense in the Army. They'd call you Joe.
yeah,
They call
Joe.
everybody Joe that they
Well,
couldn't put a name to
Yeah.
or couldn't say your name.
Lucian.
Yeah.
Lucien.
Yeah.
Oh.
When you ask if they ever got like teased or treated differently because they were French
Mm.
No.
You didn't get treated any differently in Bath because you
No.
were.
or Catholic,
No.
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 because there was enough that
I played the organ occasionally, and I used to go into that church, maybe 7 o'clock. It's dark outside, and remember we had curling stairs that went up to the balcony where the choir sang,
This is the old St. Mary's.
and I would
Yeah.
sit in
On
there
High Street.
all by myself playing that organ, and walk out of the church later. Today, you wouldn't do anything like
Mm.
that.
Mm.
No.
Yeah.
Oh,
This
anyway.
this was
It
probably
wasn't-
the original Catholic church in Bath.
It was.
The original one burned down.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh,
And this
the
one,
Know Nothings
Yeah.
burned it down.
Mhm. They burned
did it
several
burn
churches
completely
down.
or just
What
partly?
is that?
The Know Nothings.
It's
Because there were in
something that was similar to the KKK.
I've seen some art depicting.
That's
that.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
that's what made me ask the question
Yeah.
was because, I mean, so when was that? When do you think that was that they burned that down?
Before our time.
Yeah.
When I sang,
Oh, yeah.
as I say, I sang in the choir too, and there was a room off in back of the organ, and it had where we could put the music and stuff, and there were sheared
Boards.
there, and
Burned.
Yeah, you could where it had a fire.
Mm.
So
If I had to take a guess, I would say it was probably some of the mid 1800s. But just a guess. I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah.
no, we never had any problems downtown, and it was great. And I'd go into Bath department store where Sammy Levine owned, and I was a little Bisson girl, and I could take home anything I wanted to try on. I didn't have to spend time there trying on things.
Hmm.
The little Bisson girl, that's what I was called.
Hmm.
So, because, it's kind of funny because Benjamin may not realize this, but my mother had like two families. There was Jackie and Paul, who died, and then Phyllis and Lucian. And then there was a period of time where she also lost a couple more babies. And then the next family was me, Richard, and Francis. So,
How old was Jack? What's the age difference between Jackie and you
and me
and Francis?
and Francis. Well, I think she's 11 years older than I am. So
Well,
that would
she'd
be
be-
another.
She had to be 16 years
16
old.
years older than you. Yeah.
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 Well, I don't remember her living at home.
No.
We were too young.
Mm.
And she was married when she was 16.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And no, I was 5 years old when she was married. I remember that. Yeah.
Mm.
So, no, I don't remember that. And because Phyllis, there again, Phyllis was 7 years older than I. She took care of Francis, spoiled him. And that, so anyway, I do remember Phyllis. Phyllis was married when I was a senior in high school.
Mm.
Yeah. So anyway, well, we got through it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Made it this far.
Made it this far. Yeah. Made it well so far.
He was a doggondest kid, though, honestly. And because my husband was getting ready to go, well, it wasn't my husband at the time, to Iceland. That's where he spent the last year of his employment.
Service.
Yeah. But he would pick on you awful. And this last time, Bob's getting ready to leave, and he sent me a letter after that, and he said, Francis says, as soon as you leave, he's going to stop picking, he's going to complain to you about the dress he had on and this and that, or the dress I had on. And so he said in my letter, why don't you try a little psychology with Francis? Why don't you tell him that he's done a good job, or that was nice and all this business to get around him? And I laughed because it wasn't too many years ago that I found that letter, and I took it next door to show him. I couldn't get along without Francis, and my husband couldn't get along without Francis. That's why we have maintained a good relationship here for all these years. But
Yep.
no, and I
Been
think
neighbors for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my Bob helped.
1975.
1975.
Yeah, he moved in 1 year before we did,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
and because we were together in the cottage.
Right.
He was on the top floor, and I had my own bedroom.
Hmm.
But I did have to sleep with Phyllis if she came. We had to share a room. Anyway, it was a great fun. It really was. We didn't even really notice the law, did we?
No. I remember when it ended.
Yeah.
I remember going to Brunswick and celebrating.
we did. We rang the bell.
Really?
Yeah.
we were in Brunswick, and of course we just went from Grammy's house right downtown to the fire station.
Everybody was down on Main Street in
It was
Brunswick.
right on Main Street. Yeah, took a turn pulling the bell down.
Did Grampy's business change much during the war?
It increased.
Increased.
Yeah, he was really busy during the war
Mm.
because, everything came into the yard that came by rail, he handled. So, I mean, he did some awful stuff to keep a crew together. And your father probably has told you about 4F and
Yeah.
Just told me that story.
yeah,
Because everybody, a lot of help went
to war.
to the war.
yeah.
And what was
All
left
the
behind
able guys
were the guys who, for one
Yeah.
reason or other, weren't at the war.
That's right.
Yeah.
But my brother was awfully good to them. Poor old Henry Adams. And Daddy had picked up a grave for him at Calvary Cemetery to have Henry buried out there. And when Irene died, the girlfriend, he had her buried there too. And Daddy went up very often and watered the plants. And Daddy was good to all those old people. And
Yeah.
I don't think he would have let you kids even say one thing up to any of them to be mean.
No, we worked with all of them,
That's
but I mean, he did things like, this little low bed trailer that he had a beaver tail on the back end of it, and had springs in it, right? They would take and put a 4x4 block, hardwood block, between the axle and the frame, and because if you loaded it up, the springs would
Squish the tires.
overdo it and break them.
Yeah.
So he put the block of wood in there so that he could load up more on them. I mean, like all the valves that went in these ships came in at rail, the insulation. I don't know why we don't all have
Asbestosis.
asbestosis.
Yeah.
We used to, it came in these boxes that were like about that square and 4 foot long. And they were just right to be able to throw over your shoulder and lug them out of the railroad car that way.
Mm.
And we unloaded carloads of that stuff.
Mm.
But, I mean, that's the stuff he dealt with during the war.
Mm.
So.
But Daddy began to make a little money then, too. And because we were really...
It was tight for a long while for him, I believe.
Yeah, we were pretty tight. Mama had boarders, during the war.
Oh, is that right?
In
Yeah.
the house. So that's a long other story, but another time. But no, she we never knew where we were going to sleep because that house had, 5 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms? I don't know. Anyway, it was a big house. I wrote a story about the house on High Street, too. And anyway, we never quite knew which room we were going to have because they took the room over the kitchen, which was originally a kitchen for the maid.
Maid, yeah.
And left that as a kitchen for the renters. And then they had to have a room to sleep in. So it depended on how many of them there were and where we were going to sleep. We just were talking about that. Was it yesterday, I guess?
Mm.
We decided we slept in every room in that house at
Really?
one point or another. And
Get
we were
moved
used
around,
to it. Mama had a few $100s that she made doing things like that. And they never told us how tight things were, except I remember Mama saying to me one time, because I was a puny child, that she would be walking me and trying to keep me quiet while for Daddy to come home with 35 cents in his pocket to buy a jar of baby food for me.
Mm.
It was tough.
Mm.
And then when Lucian died, my goodness, Father Maine gave them that lot. It's at Calvary,
Mm.
And that Daddy paid for that, believe me. He gave much money to the church.
Mm.
But at the time, Daddy didn't have anything, and they buried Lucian. And Mama couldn't afford to go out and buy a suit to put on Lucian in the casket. And so they talked to the bishop and had him buried in his cassock and surplice, which was quite nice.
Mm.
Yeah.
Then on the other end of that spectrum, I was an altar boy, believe it or not.
Yes, he was.
And Father Maine was the priest then.
Yeah.
And, you had to go in every morning during the week to to help with the mass, and it was all in Latin back then, and you had to respond in Latin. Well, this kid by the name of St. Pierre lived down on Shepherd Street. He and I were doing this week, and so it's 7:30 in the morning, and that's two kids. I'm talking to this kid, and Father Maine, you two boys, you stop talking down there. And I thought, well, that's all over, right? We get back out in the sacristy. He grabs that kid by the shirt and grabs me by the shirt. He holds us like this, right, face to face. Says, "Okay, you boys, now you want to fight? You go ahead and fight." We weren't fighting; we were just talking. But it scared the devil out of us.
Well, I sang the funeral masses, and there were 3 of us, and we got paid. It was $5 total. The organist got 2, and the other 3 of us each got $1. So Father Maine, we had to go down from the choir loft and all through the church and out to the sacristy. And Father Maine would say, well, what do you want? And we'd say, well, we want our money. He said, well, you're going to have to flip a coin for that. He'd make us go through this. Heads or tails. And we were grown up. We weren't just kids. We were grown up. And he'd make us heads or tails, but he'd always end up giving us naturally. He gave us $5. But God, he was funny. He really
he'd
was.
He'd go downtown.
Oh, I know.
And he'd invariably end up down in my father's office.
Yeah.
And my father would have to give him a ride home.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he knew if he went down the office.
Because he didn't have a car, too, because he had to bring the money down on Monday. And so sometimes he'd come in the office and say, I want that little Bisson girl to give me a ride up the hill.
So this was at the office down on Commercial Street?
Yeah. That was interesting.
Hmm.
No bathrooms, nothing. If you wanted to go to the bathroom, you had to go across the street to the water company, and I don't know
There was a bathroom on the other end, though, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, that was hard to find, yeah.
You had to get down and deal with...
Anyway, it was an interesting place, but could sit out in the back if I wasn't too busy watching the man come and put all the gear on to go for diving.
Yeah.
The helmet that they screwed on and got him all ready to go.
What would he go diving for?
Inspect the water line.
Yeah.
They had to go down and check it every year,
Mm-hmm.
And he.
And then there was
his name was Bates.
Place next door that was making the squash, though. That was when Ray died.
Yeah.
When my Ray died, he was 37, of course. Daddy went out and bought a whole case of that squash because Ray loved squash pie. It was something he could have on his diet. So, but that's long gone.
Yeah.
That place. Well, Mr. Troop lived on Cobb Road where we had a house when we were first married. Oh, well, those days were fun just the same.
Yeah.
We'd all like to go and be young and well again.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. And it's kind of the beginning of more stories, and I really appreciate the book, the memories here, because I'll see how I can incorporate that too. Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you
I
very
have
much.
other things too, besides. But that one, Daddy was living with me when I did this. So if there was anything really wrong in it, he didn't pick up on it. Let's put it that way, because he told me all those stories, and I thought it would make him happy if I put that all down for him. So,
anything I didn't ask that you had in your mind? Great.
I'm sure we'll talk about it after.
Yes, I'm sure we will. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
All right.
welcome.
Good.